Hello and welcome to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. Thanks for joining us. This week we are joined by Harvard Law School professor Randall Kennedy. He is really quite a guest. Remember, we take your questions each episode, so write into politicswarroom@gmail.com or send a tweet to @Politicon for next week's show. We'll get to as many as we can. Don't forget to tell us where you're from. And please check out the link to this week's sponsors, Rise and HelloFresh, in the show notes. We thank you for supporting our sponsors. It really makes this podcast happen. Please tell your friends about us and remind them to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast. Hey, James Carville, I have covered or watched congressional hearings for a long time. But this week's that special committee January 6 hearing with 4 police officers who risked their lives fending off a mob assault on the Capitol, I think may have been the most compelling since the Sam Ervin 1973 Watergate hearings. These were cops, veterans, men of exceptional courage who were beaten and insulted by a crazy mob. There were videos that documented these assertions, lest any of the right want to say, question their credibility. And they made, I think, about 3 or 4 important points. Number one, these were terrorists that assaulted the Capitol January 6th. It wasn't a bunch of protesters who just went overboard. They talked about killing people. They were Trump supporters. They had their MAGA gear on, and they said they were inspired by Trump. And their intent wasn't to protest, wasn't to peacefully or even with a little bit of out of hand to say we're upset about Trump. They came to overturn a constitutional process. As one officer said, we were defending democracy against a mob. It was riveting. I couldn't turn it off. And I think, James, you will agree with this. Special praise for 3 members. The chair, Benny Thompson, who wouldn't have been my choice, but he struck a perfect tone. It was a perfect tone. And he wisely engaged Republican Liz Cheney as his partner that day. Cheney and Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, the 2 Republicans Pelosi appointed, displayed character, integrity, and devotion to rule of law. It was really, it was the sort of thing that made you feel awfully good about parts of this country.
Yeah, one of they said they were terrorists. I disagree. I would say they were criminals, but I'm not going to get into an argument about whether they were probably both. But I don't know why we just can't call people criminals. But one of I think it was a female, said, look, we wasn't there to rob, we wasn't there to steal, we were just there to overthrow the government. Just like you're talking about an admission against interest. I mean, that's about the highest admission you can get an interest. And these people are so warped and so utterly fucked up that they don't think there's anything wrong with trying to overthrow the government. You're right. What was the first? Tell people how long. What's the first congressional committee you can remember covering? When was it?
Well, there were lots of routine hearings, but the first one that you never forget was the Sam Ervin 1973 hearing. I mean, those
you
were
had even covered 1973. All right. Okay.
Right.
So there we are, almost 50 years later. 73 and 2003 is what?
Right.
You know,
48 years by LSU standards.
Yeah. Okay. So that's pretty amazing. And, you know, I don't have nearly the experience as a journalist of watching them, or C-SPAN a little bit. I thought it was some of the most riveting television I'd ever seen, not just congressional hearing. And more to come, people, more to come. And the reason that they're all so scared and the reason they're doing this is we're going to, you know, when you can ask Professor Kennedy when he gets on, if I'm the lookout guy in an armed robbery, I'm just as guilty as the armed robber. If I case the joint and I give the armed robber, I'm just as guilty. And what they're going to find out, I believe, that Republican members of Congress and Republican staffers, that they were actually criminals in that building. And I think that's what they're driving at.
I think there's a good chance that's the case, James. And it just shows why the Republicans, the Kevin McCarthy Republicans, so desperately wanted to avoid this hearings. It was so devastating. And all they can do now is spin lies. And their lies change every day. It's situational lying. It's now all the fault of Nancy Pelosi. Elise Stefanik, who has become a Trumpite, a woman who doesn't let integrity or character get in the way, said Pelosi was responsible for inadequate security and dragging her feet and calling in reinforcements. That's a lie, James. That's just not wrong. It's a lie. She wasn't responsible for security. The people responsible for not calling in reinforcements was the Trump administration. Andrew Clyde from Georgia, he gives Marjorie Greene a really close race for the dumbest newcomer in Congress. He still says these were mainly tourists. Didn't he watch any of those scenes? And especially Jim Jordan, your favorite, Jim Jordan, finally, after 5 questions, had to admit to Bret Baier that he talked to Trump January 6th. He's the one they wanted to put on the committee. I mean, for God's sakes, you never put a material witness on the jury. I mean, it is remarkable. And they lie, and they lie, and they lie. And I don't know. I don't know if they're going to get away with it. I hope not.
Well, first of all, at least I think it was Glenn Kessler, one of the fact checkers, and I don't think that whoever it was would get it wrong, but I think it was the Post. Nancy Pelosi doesn't have anything to do with the Capitol Police. There's a Capitol Police board, all right?
There is.
But it doesn't, what they have come to learn is just like as soon as on January the 6th, on January 7th, they said, well, it was Antifa. Okay, so then, of course, that's totally untrue, 100% untrue. And they just move, and their people are satiated by lies. So they just make anything up that they want. But I don't believe I spent a lot of time in Mississippi. I have a place there, and I think Benny is put together a hell of a team here. And of course, all hail Speaker Pelosi. And I like the fact that a black guy and a female are just slapping the living shit out of them along with Liz Cheney. It's gratifying to watch this. It's really gratifying.
Boy, Cheney and Kinzinger deserve a special place. I haven't voted for a lot of Republicans in recent years, but if I could move to Wyoming or Illinois, I'd pull that R button for them.
I've always teased you about you're always looking for the good Republican. Well,
I found
at least on this issue, we found. I'm going to tell you something about Liz Cheney. She ain't gonna change. She's dug in. And the only thing she's going to do is dig in more. I promise you. That woman.
Well, she has a problem, James. She has a real problem. She cares about the truth, and that poses real difficulties. And the counter to that, a special place in hell. I mentioned Jordan and I mentioned Stefanik and Clyde and others, but a special place in hell for Kevin McCarthy. He is a heir to his namesake, Joe, when it comes to demagoguery and disregard for the truth, but he's not nearly as smart as Joe McCarthy. He's kind of Joe McCarthy minus 20 points. He's just a weak coward. And he's desperate to hold on, and he's making a fool of himself, and it doesn't matter because all that matters to him is whatever he can spin in order to become the next speaker.
Well, I called him a pathetic glob of protoplasm. Let me tell you, the one person that hopes that Kevin McCarthy doesn't die, because if Kevin McCarthy dies, then he will be the most spineless person in the Republican Party, and that's Lindsey Graham. As long as Kevin McCarthy is alive, no one can say that Lindsey Graham is the most spineless person in the Republican Party. Now, he's got built-in insurance right there.
I don't know. I think we ought to have a runoff. I don't think it's as clear-cut as that. It's close.
Let some of our listeners come in, and I think Kevin McCarthy is more spineless than Lindsey Graham. You say it's a debate. I would defer to our listeners on that, but we would like some participation on this issue. Who is more spineless, gutless, cowardly? Lindsey Graham, R, South Carolina, or Kevin McCarthy, D, California?
That's a Super Bowl contest. Send it in to @Politicon. We'll let you know next week what the results are.
And I'm willing to
accept
as
many as you can. Okay.
Well,
I'm not predicting.
I know.
Graham. I'm just saying it's close.
The more I think about it, the closer it is.
It, a final thought on this, which is, will they get away with it? I mean, they have their things. We all thought that after January the 6th, that the Republican Party was in a state of crisis, if not dead. But James, they seem to get away with a lot of this stuff. I don't know if it'll be that case again, but it worries me because it's so clear cut. I go back when you were covering whether even the Nixon impeachment in the beginning, there were two sides. I thought one side was much more convincing than the other. Tax cuts, two sides. War in Iraq, two sides. You can agree or disagree. There's not two sides. I mean, there's not a counter argument. So the question is, will they get away with it?
So let me ask you a question. There's two sides. On what side have the Republicans ever been right on? Right? They're really, on tax cuts, you even like,
I think George Bush was right in the first Iraq War.
Well, a lot of Democrats voted. Some Democrats voted for that. I think he was.
Yeah, I think George Bush was right on the Americans with Disabilities Act. There's some.
That was a Democratic thing. All right, tax cuts, it ain't close. Abortion, you could say, people can have an opinion. All right, I'm not.
I mean, James, I agree with you 90%. I just not 100. I don't think. I think George W. Bush was pretty good on AIDS.
He was.
I mean, when I reached Donald Trump,
they were definitely not good. Was on promoting gay marriage to save his political ass. But never mind. Your point's well taken, and this is minor compared to the crap we're dealing with now. So,
and I come to a screeching halt on that when it comes to Donald Trump. There's nothing redeeming about Donald Trump, politically or personally, and he lost. Big loser this week, congressional race in Texas, which he really got deeply involved in. Went and campaigned for the candidate, put out calls, all kinds of stuff, and she lost. James, what does that say about Donald Trump?
I don't know, Al. I think that the poor ticket sales for the O'Reilly Trump tour are indicative of something. Mm-hmm. I think this is indicative of something. Mm-hmm. What? I don't quite know. But I'll tell you what sophisticated people that I talk to in politics says. Part of Trump's brand, and I think Trump understands this, is he's a winner. All right? He owns the libs. And right now, he looks like a guy that is getting owned. And I don't think his people are going to give up on Trumpism, but I think that the fact that he seems to be losing on a lot of fronts right now actually hurts him. That's what I really believe. I think that was really part of his brand, that, it's a kind of grab your crotch, shoot somebody the bird, I own your ass, I'm a winner. That John Anzalone believes that. I believe that. I think other people believe that is a cornerstone of his popularity. And he's starting to look like a loser. And he's got to
do... Well, James, he is a loser.
Well, we know that. Okay, I'm talking to his people. Yeah. Okay, and I'm talking about the people that don't get vaccinated, the people that don't believe in climate change. Okay, that's kind of people. I'm talking about stupid people actually thought he was a winner. Now even stupid people are starting to see, I don't know, maybe this guy's not that much of a winner. But I don't know. That's a theory, and maybe it'll play out over a period of time.
There was a small test in that Texas special congressional election. Another test coming up, which we've talked about before, is going to be the Virginia governor's race. He's going all in for this guy, Glenn Youngkin, whether Youngkin wants it or not. I've seen Terry McAuliffe's first batch of real commercials, and he is all into linking Youngkin and Trump. And if they take another big drubbing in Virginia, it's going to, I think, add to that feeling. If, on the other hand, they win that race, God help us.
Right. So you and I follow this closely. We talk a lot. So I think I'm going to echo you. You can disagree. I haven't seen like a Jeff Guerin poll in the last couple of weeks or so, or whatever. All right. But you really get the feeling that McAuliffe has done a lot better over the last 30 days. And in that video that American Bridge clocked him on of him talking about, abortion is just freaking devastating. And you've covered politics enough to know that these first-time guys, it seldom works. They don't have their footing.
Right.
And I don't know,
Right.
we could lose it. Something may come up. It may go south. But wherever it is, I think we would both agree it's in a better place today than it was on July 4th.
Totally agree, and I would certainly strongly suspect, that we haven't heard the end of Mr. Youngkin's hypocrisy or two-facedness,
Right. I hope that don't, because he worked for Carlyle Group. I don't think
Yep.
I think the fruitful area for him is just what Terry's doing is tying him to Trump every day. And they had Biden go down there and they just had this joyous campaign event and tying him to hypocrisy every day. Because, as you pointed out, was it 10 out of the last 11 times that somebody's won the presidency and lost the Virginia governorship?
Right.
So we're going to, the Virginia election is more important than you think. That's what I think. Not you think. I think our viewers think. I think you think it's important.
Yes. You think it, I think it, and I think our viewers will think it. So anyway, but please write in. We have another contest. This is another new contest.
Right.
You've been great on the Ivy League Sphincter Hall of Fame, but now this is the spineless
This
Hall
guy
of
is
Fame.
spineless.
Kevin McCarthy.
Or Lindsey Graham. And please don't put
Kevin
Mitch
McCarthy
McConnell.
against Lindsey Graham.
You're talking a different kind of character than Lindsey Graham or Ted Cruz, all right?
Right.
We're talking about utterly spineless, cowardly, compromised people.
And we're both a little bit torn, and you decide.
Right.
You get to decide. So we'll look forward to hearing from you.
I have an observation. I don't know if you like it. When I wake up in the morning, I'll look at my, cell phone, and it's 4:30. I know I'm going to have a shitty day. All right? And I try to go back to sleep, and my pattern is screwed up. The single most determinative factor in the way that I feel is how much I sleep. All right? Now, I tell us about this product because I haven't tried it yet, but I got to tell you, I'm really interested in it because that really matters to me.
Hey, James, I have an answer for you. It's Rise, a science-based app to improve sleep and your daily energy. Now, we all sometimes feel groggy or sluggish, particularly as we get up there in years, but it's not normal to feel tired all day. That means you're carrying sleep debt, limiting your energy peaks and making your dips less productive. So you might be surprised to know you can become a morning person, all without ditching your phone, buying supplements or a mattress or a weighted blanket. Rise uses a scientific, fact-based approach to help you get the rest you need with cutting-edge sleep research. Rise works by pulling historical data from your phone to tell you your sleep needs and tracks how much sleep you still owe your body. Then it shows you your daily energy schedule and shows you techniques to pay it back so you can make the most of your day. Every morning, Rise tells you how long you'll be groggy, when your peak focus times will be, and when to start winding down for better sleep and more energy. James, it's made for you.
Yeah, totally. You know what? I'm going to see my daughter on Sunday, and she's going to set this thing up for me. I can't wait. Because I'm serious. The time I get up in the morning is the most determinative thing of how I'm going to feel that day. And, this sounds like, really putting technology to good use. And boy, if that thing got me 45 minutes more sleep a night, and I think it can. I have great hope for it. Great hope.
And tells you what your energy level is. This is what we both need. Yeah, it helps you realize your potential with real results, real productivity, real performance, and real well-being. So go to risescience.com/warroom and download the Rise app today to try it for 7 days. Most Rise users feel the benefits in just 5 days. So try it today to learn more about your sleep and energy levels, and plus feel better, all for free during this trial. And whether you want to become a morning person, be less exhausted during the day, or improve your productivity and daily energy, Rise is the power behind your next best day. That's risescience.com/war room to try the Rise free app for 7 days.
Well, I'm excited about this. This is right in James Carville's wheelhouse. Let me tell you.
Does that mean you're going to have higher energy, James, for this show? I can't imagine that.
I'm telling you, I don't get hangovers anymore because I know how much I can drink and not a hangover. But if I get 5 hours of sleep, I'm a different person than if I get 7.5, 8. I can tell you.
Oh, me too. Me too. I don't know if we're still going, but also you tend at a certain age to wake up a few more times in the night, or once or twice more,
wonder why.
maybe visit the restroom, and sometimes it is hard to get back to sleep. Rise is what we all need. Hey, James, our guest is the distinguished, and I don't use that word lightly, Harvard Law School professor Randall Kennedy. One of America's foremost experts on issues pertaining to race and law. It is an especially opportune time to talk to him since the critical race theory, if Republicans have their way, is becoming a major political issue. First, Professor Kennedy, thank you so much for joining us. It is an honor. And I want to start with a very simple question. What is the critical race theory?
Well, nowadays, critical race theory doesn't have a real meaning. For Republicans, it's anything that you don't like. Originally, if you go back into the 1980s, critical race theory had its origins in legal academia, where you had people who were to the left and who asked the following question: why, in the aftermath of the Civil Rights Revolution, do we still have such a massive race problem in America? And they basically said that some of the ideas behind the Civil Rights Revolution were inadequate. So, for instance, they didn't believe in, color blindness. They believed that we were going to have to be a lot more aggressive, a lot more race conscious in order to move the society to a higher level with respect to the race question. But that's not what people are talking about nowadays with respect to critical race theory, frankly.
No, it's the way the Republicans want to paint it. And they take, I guess, what might be termed the least attractive elements of what was a perfectly legitimate academic theory. But what Republicans are saying, this is really about white guilt. It's about people who say racism is so embedded that it's not only systemic, but it's not eradicable, and that the legal system really hasn't changed that much.
That's right. Now that's what they're saying.
That's wrong, isn't it? I mean, that itself, to say the legal system hasn't changed, whatever the imperfections, and Lord knows they're there, the legal system has made a lot of progress in the last 60 years.
Yes, absolutely. And, I deplore the attack on critical race theory. This is just the latest iteration of the right-wing, cultural war against anything they view as progressive. But there are aspects of critical race theory that are vulnerable to attack. So, for instance, there are people who call themselves critical race theorists who say, for instance, that, black people cannot be racist. Well, listen, anybody can be racist. And so, there are vulnerabilities, but that's, again, not what's really going on here. What's really going on here is people just, the people on the right conjuring up a boogeyman. And that's what's going on. And by the way, they're doing it quite effectively.
No, I think they are. Their main targets, they say we want to ban this from being taught in the public square and taught in public schools. I don't believe it's being taught in very many public schools in America. And we teach a lot of things in schools that are dubious, Marxism, supply side economics. But you're right, they are being affected. As far as I know, it's mainly being taught in law schools. Is that right?
Well, again, it all depends on what it is. I mean, you think of it like this. One of the central features of critical race theory is simply the proposition that race has mattered a tremendous amount in American history with respect to all aspects of American society. Well, who doesn't believe that? I mean, I don't call myself a critical race theorist, but I certainly believe that race has been
Yep.
quite central to American life. There's another thing. Isn't it ironic that the Republicans who have, year after year after year criticized so-called cancel culture have criticized people, progressives for wanting to, according to them, shut up everybody. Now they're coming forward and passing laws saying you can't teach this and you can't teach that and you can't propound the other. What hypocritical goal?
James.
So, Professor, I'm a little bit nervous here because I'm like a C-plus student at LSU Law talking to a Harvard law professor, but I'm going to try to get through this and get my footing here. I want to divert a little bit from critical race theory, and you've written a lot about crime.
Yes.
And crime, particularly as it relates to race.
Yes.
And we're trying to get, we have an invitation for Reverend Senator Warnock to come on the show. So he's going to be running for re-election. We know that's going to be an issue. Crime, homicides are up terribly in Atlanta. How would you advise Senator Warnock to deal with this? Because there's some people on the left say that, well, this is just understandable. This is part of the structures of the world that we live in. And I think that's a losing political message, to say the least. But I'd like for you to weigh on this sort of crime issue, and particularly how race impacts it.
Sure. I would urge Senator Warnock and anybody else to be straightforward and candid and not run away from ugly realities. The fact of the matter is that crime is a problem. It didn't just become a problem. It has been a long-standing problem, particularly in disadvantaged communities. I mean, wealthy people can do all sorts of things to protect themselves. They can go behind, they can be in gated communities. They can be in communities where, they can hire their own police forces, for goodness sakes. It's poor people who need good policing. I mean, policing is an absolutely essential public good. Now, we need good policing. We don't need abusive police. We don't need racist police. But do we need good police? Absolutely. And with respect to getting resources to police, we need to funnel resources to police. Indeed, we need to pay police more. So I would urge the senator not to run away from the issue. If there has been an uptick, there has been an uptick, and we need to address it. So that's what I would say.
So I want to keep getting your kind of political opinions on things. One of the things that I detect, and you would be more familiar, there's a generational divide among blacks. It's not monolithic. I think, the way that we used to do politics is you would go to the Sunday churches, you would bring John Lewis in, or you know what I mean? You would do the typical stuff. I don't think that, and of course you see the best and the brightest come through you because you're on the faculty at Harvard Law School, but do you detect that the way that your parents looked at things is significantly different than the way that your students today look at things? I'm just urging a lot of people to do a lot of research as to how, if Democrats want to do better, where there's real slack in the rope is getting younger communities of color. I don't like the word, but phrase, but I'll just use it because it's a catch-all phrase. Involved. Do you sense that have been teaching and seeing generations come through your classrooms? Are you seeing a divide within the particularly the black community, between older and younger, the way they view the world?
Yes. It's a complicated story, though. And on the one hand,
Okay.
among the younger folks, we have people like, the great Stacey Abrams. And we have, I salute. And we have these activists on the ground who've been working and have been doing some magnificent work. Some of the Black Lives Matter people, magnificent work. And so, and I embrace that. On the other hand, and here's directly responding to your point about generational difference, I find myself having difficulty with some of my students. They listen to me and they look at me and I'm 66 years old.
Yeah.
And they say to me,
Okay.
Professor Kennedy, you are stuck in respectability politics. I say to the students, listen, comport yourselves in a fashion that will gain the respect of everyone, including your adversaries. I talk about, you mentioned John Lewis. I say, John Lewis and the Freedom Riders, they were told to comport themselves in a way such that when they would get arrested, and they knew they were going to get arrested, but when they got arrested, they wanted their parents, they wanted their community to be proud of them. So they were very careful about what they wore. They were very careful about how they acted. They were very careful about what they said. And in my view, that was good. That was good politics. Now, a lot of my students look at me and they say, Professor Kennedy, you're too concerned with the white folks. You're too concerned with impressing them. You're too concerned with accommodating their feelings. And what I say back to them is, listen, we're talking politics here. So if I want to get people on my side, I don't apologize for that. And it seems to me, if you're talking politics, that's right. You want to be very careful about how you present yourself to other people. You want to get as many people on your side as possible, and you want to blunt the attacks of your adversaries. I still hold by that, but there are a lot of younger people who view that as accommodationist, who view that as, again, they put down, they deride that as respectability politics.
Right. So before I turn it over now, I've asked this sometimes, even my students, people are like, well, I think 68, 69% of people going to vote in an election are going to be white. It's fundamentally stupid if you want to win an election to tell 70% of the people you're not worth a shit. I mean, the good news, we don't need a majority of whites to win.
Yeah.
All right. In hell, in Mississippi, if we got the registration the way that we need it, we could win with 22 and a half. But you got to have some. It just, I have this problem even with my students. So I'm going to turn it over to Al. I want to get your reaction to one more thing, because I read about you. You actually are kind of free speech guy. And I would tell my students, the only reason I don't do this is not philosophical. I just don't want to give the fucking university to have them crap a pineapple. But I would invite David Duke. I would be glad to debate him. And if I hadn't taught you any better that you would be seduced by that, then that's shame on me. Mm-hmm. I haven't done it, and I'm done with it. But what's your reaction to racist free speech, if you will? Just you can't think of a better word for it.
I tell people, do not be afraid of anything. And and again, I go back to the great people of the Second Reconstruction. We've had so many losses. We just lost the great Bob Moses. We lost John Lewis.
Yeah, I saw that.
I tell my students, I say, listen, if my activist students, I say to my activist students, take a look at what they did. They were not afraid. They were not trying to shut anything down. They said, bring it on. We'll talk. We'll debate. And I think that it's that spirit. I urge my students to embrace that spirit. Let me say one other thing. You talked about white people. That's right. The United States of America has a lot of white people in it. And you need them.
Yeah.
You need them. And I would press it a little bit further. Let's go back to the crime issue. There's been a lot of talk about the police and, abusive police. That's a very bad thing. It's really an Achilles heel in our legal system, the lack of regulation of police. But one thing I say to folks is, in talking, the police rough up white people too. It's not just black people who are roughed up or who are shot by the police. What about white people? And getting back, by the way, to the critical race theory people, one of the ideas of critical race theory, it was propounded by my long-standing colleague Derek Bell. Derek Bell had an idea that, listen, you're not going to have change in America until you're able to link it with something that'll be helpful to white people. That was one of his central ideas, and it's one of the central ideas of a lot of people who call themselves critical race theorists. I say to them, fine, embrace that idea, and let's take it to crime. Now, when we talk about police and abuse of police, people immediately think black. They immediately think of the black person who's been thrown to the ground by the police, or the black person who has been wrongly arrested by the police. I say, hey, let's make it clear that there are plenty of white people who are treated badly by police, shot by police, wrongly arrested. Let's not make it the case that as soon as we say police, as soon as we say crime, people immediately think of a black face. No, let's get the white people involved in this. And let's make it clear that white people also have have skin in the game here. It would be good for white people to have police better trained, better regulated, better educated. So yeah, white people need to be part of all of these conversations as far as I'm concerned, more a part of all of these conversations.
That's such an important point. There should not be a contradiction between saying some communities need more police, not only not defund the police, they need more police, but they need better police and more accountable police. That should not be contradictory.
Absolutely. And by the way, again, let's not be afraid of just facts. We just had there was just an election in New York City. Right? I mean, primary anyway, the general's coming up.
Yep.
Right.
The person who will probably be the next mayor of New York City was a police officer. He was a police officer who got a lot of support by making it clear that he recognizes that people need good police. People need protection against, criminals. And we've seen that. We saw that in Minneapolis. We've seen that over and over and over. Regular folk need protection against people who would encroach upon them, upon their lives, upon their liberties, upon their property. I am a progressive, and I say that. And I think that we need to be really clear about that point.
Boy, that's such an important point. James's favorite Senate candidate, Val Demings in Florida, is a sheriff. My guess is that her message is going to be very similar to Eric Adams. And let's hope that more progressives take that counsel. I spoke to you last week, and you said something along the lines of, you thought for whatever problems we have, we were beyond the point where we had an actively race-baiting national political figure who pandered to racial fears, and then along came Donald Trump.
Well, frankly, you've hit upon a sore nerve with me because I feel a bit embarrassed, to tell you the truth. I study the race question. I've put a lot of time into it. And that's right. I did think that we were beyond certain things. I did think that, for instance, I did not think that you could be a national politician and be comfortable race baiting. Well, clearly I was wrong. I thought that the country was further along than the country is. We still have, large swaths of the population that are susceptible, that are amenable to race baiting. That, it seems to me, is just a fact, and we're going to have to grapple with that.
This is not the same as Trump, but the conservatives, the dominant conservatives on this Supreme Court have really, I think you would argue, I would argue, certainly have set back racial progress with some of those decisions, like Shelby in the last 5 or 10 years.
Absolutely.
Is that a fair?
Well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the case in which the Supreme Court of the United States, I guess it was in 2013, eviscerated the Voting Rights Act of 1965, I think that case is going to go down in history as one of the great judicial delinquencies. I think that case 100 years from now will be talked about in the same breath as, Plessy versus Ferguson. I think it was an outrage. I really do. And it's clear that the conservative bloc on the Supreme Court is not going to give a strong anti-discrimination look at some of the state legislation that's coming down the pike with respect to voting. The Supreme Court of the United States, for the foreseeable future, will not be an ally of racial justice. To the contrary, it will be an obstacle to campaigns for racial justice. I don't say that happily. I say that I say that with a heavy heart, but it's just true, and it's all the more reason. It's all the more reason why these elections are so important. I mean, the fact of the matter is that the composition of the Supreme Court of the United States is a function of elections. Now, there's some luck in there as well, of course. Some presidents get more picks than other presidents, but by and large, what happens in courts, at least with respect to the constitutional decisions, it's largely a function of political tendency, and that's why these elections are going to be so important. Senate, president in particular.
So I'm a student. I'm going to raise my hand and said, Professor, I disagree with you about Shelby. I think the single most significant case in modern American jurisprudence is Bush v. Gore. Because these motherfuckers stole an election from us and we didn't do shit about it. And they said, you know what? If we can steal a presidential election, we can do anything we want. So that leads to Shelby County. That leads to all of this. They just went out in thievery and said, look, this decision doesn't matter about anything but now, but we're just going to take this thing and we're going to steal this election from you. And you know what you do about it? Not shit. And the New York Times and the Washington Post and everybody said, oh, thank God Al Gore respected constitutional democracy. For the life of me, and I get in arguments with Walter Dellinger and people like that, and I said, you don't understand. In my world, Bush v. Gore said, you can do whatever you want. And therefore, you just say, we're not going to vote on Merrick Garland. We're just going to ram Amy Barrett through. We don't give a shit because no one is going to do anything because the country are feeble. I really believe that. I don't mean to challenge a Harvard law professor, but that is my view, Professor.
Listen, I think that
Bush v. Gore.
I think that Bush versus Gore was a terrible judgment. I remember the day in particular. I was so sure that the Supreme Court of the United States was going to do what it had, what law professors sort of thought it was going to do. That is to say, this is a political issue, it's a political question. We're not going to get involved. I thought for sure that was going to happen. And I must say, yes, I was dumbstruck by its intervention. It was a terrible, another delinquency. Now we're debating which one is worse. Well, to tell you the truth, I still think that Shelby County was worse. But the point is, now we're really arguing at the margins. The fact of the matter is
Right.
that the Supreme Court of the United States, for a good long while now, has been controlled by a conservative faction. For instance, I really don't like it when the newspapers talk about, they speak as if only now the Supreme Court is becoming conservative. The Supreme Court has been controlled by conservatives for a good long while. And during that period, this conservative faction has been unfriendly and has shown its unfriendliness towards campaigns for racial justice and other things as well. It's not just racial justice. If we're thinking about organized labor, if we're thinking about poor people, the Supreme Court of the United States has been a tremendous obstacle. And that's just the way it is. And it's going to be like that, actually, for a while.
Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Al.
Yeah.
The point I'm making is, the reason we have Shelby is because we had Bush v. Gore. The reason we had World War II is we had World War I. I'm not arguing that World War I was worse than World War II, but the point I'm making is that the two are connected at the hip. That they knew when they saw they could get away with this, I think it just gave them shit. The Democrats ain't gonna do anything. They're too lame ass to do what? And Mitch McConnell just rams crap through. But that's my view from here.
Hey, Randall Kennedy, I want to tell you, our friend Walter Dellinger, who is the kind of the counsel to this show, he a great believer in free speech because he does it for free. But he told us, you're the best. Walter has nailed it once again. You have been just a fabulous guest, and I cannot thank you enough.
Thanks so much for having me on, and continue with this, because public education, as you know, is absolutely essential.
So, Prof, can I ask you a question? But you're from Columbia, South Carolina.
I am.
And we at LSU are really excited about our new president, Dr. Tate, who's going to be the first black SEC president, who is the provost at the University of South Carolina.
Yes.
And I don't know if you know or know of him, but he's got a sterling reputation from everything that I can discern. And we're excited beyond our minds.
I saw that he had become the president, and I know that he was provost at the USC. And I will say this, and I think it's really pertinent to what we were just talking about. This moment is a very dark moment. I feel tremendous trepidation. Having said that, we have to keep things in perspective and also recognize, you know, we've faced bad moments before, and also recognize change when we see it. That's right. The president of LSU is an African American. Well, you know what? My father, of blessed memory, would have been delighted. He wouldn't have even, he would, in his lifetime, unimaginable.
Right.
So we have to keep on pushing. That's the point. We have to keep on pushing.
I always tell my students, Frederick Douglass said the Republican Party is the ship, everything else is the sea. You know, Martin Luther King always went to the Oval Office, always maintained a line of communications with Lyndon Johnson. They understood this. Politics is the greatest word in the English language when it's practiced with deftness and toughness and idealism. So I am and I think you're that kind of guy that understands that politics is the way that we really make advancements in this country.
Absolutely. And just one last thing. I mean, you talked about the law. The law is the crystallization of politics. I mean, it's got its own language, it's got its own protocols, it's got its own logics. But when you really get down to it, particularly with respect to constitutional law, it is the crystallization of our politics. So absolutely, politics, absolutely essential.
First thing the Supreme Court does is read the election returns? No, they changed the election returns now. Thank you. Go ahead, Al.
We have learned a lot today, Randall Kennedy, and if you run across my dear friend Martha Minow up there, please say hi.
Listen, you all be well.
Thank you very
so
much.
Professor Kennedy. Big honor to have you on our show. Thank you.
Take care. Be well. Bye-bye.
Hey, now we want to tell you about a delicious meal service that won a big position on our dining table this past year. With HelloFresh, you get fresh, pre-measured ingredients and mouth-watering seasonal recipes delivered right to your door. So skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. And thanks to HelloFresh, eating healthier has never been easier. With HelloFresh's calorie-smart options, make it easier to enjoy tasty, lower-calorie meals this summer without endlessly searching the store for ingredients or scouring the web for unproven recipes. My only complaint, James, is that my daughter steals them from me, when I get them, because she loves them. But what we're really excited about this summer is that HelloFresh has everything you need to get grilling. Think grilling bundles, burger packs, surf and turf packs, and more that all add to less shopping and more sizzle. And their produce gets from the farm to your door in less than a week, which means fresh, high-quality ingredients. Your whole family will love it, as yours has, James.
But look, this stuff is tasty, all right? And like when you go, if I go to dinner, you don't know exactly what you get. The nutritional stuff is right there. So I have, some, it's kind of controllable, but I have late life high blood pressure issues. All right. And so you go out, you go somewhere, you might be getting 4,000 milligrams of sodium and not even know it. All right. I mean, this stuff is, you can look at it, it's right there, you know what you're getting, but it's not, it's actually, because I'm from Louisiana, I think food should taste good. This stuff really tastes good. It really tastes good, and you know exactly what you're getting. And these guys tell you exactly what's in it, and you can adjust according to that. I think it's invaluable. It's massively convenient, and at the end of the day, it's pretty goddamn. It's not pretty. It's very tasty.
Tasty and healthy is a great combination. So Eat well with HelloFresh. Go to HelloFresh.com/WarRoom14 and use code WarRoom14. That's all one word. You get 14 free meals plus free shipping for America's #1 meal kit. Remember, go to HelloFresh.com/WarRoom14 and use code WarRoom14 for up to 14 free meals plus free shipping. We also include the link in our show notes.
So I know a lot of people, particularly of our generation, but some people go, think TV dinner. That's like comparing the tricycle you got as a child with a Tesla S-Class or something, all right? This is not the same product at all. This is a Piper Cub compared to, Airbus 350 or whatever, Boeing, 787. You got to try this. I urge everybody listening to this. Try this stuff once, and I guarantee you're going to come back and back. I guarantee you.
And tell my daughter to stay away from my HelloFresh. I want it.
Oh,
okay.
It's good for her.
Hey, James, you're going to love some of these questions today. This is first from Jessica, who lives in California now, but she is a fellow Louisianan. She lives in California, but she was from Baton Rouge, born and raised there. Her dad graduated from that magnificent institution, the Louisiana State University. She went to middle school, McKinley Middle School, before her family moved to Australia. And she's moved back to the U.S. when she was 19. She's now 42. And you can see that education, that Baton Rouge education, really served her well, because she makes a very good point. In light of all the recent events and all the Republican attacks on women, I've come up with a tweet-length Democratic message for the 2022 midterms. Here it is. Suburban moms, if Republicans take the House, they will take away the child tax credit Democrats gave you. Vote like your child care depends on it, because it does. It's the child care, stupid. We'll be hearing more of this. I like that, Jessica.
I'll tell you what, why don't you come, we'll do a partners and we'll go do a campaign somewhere. Your political instincts are glorious. By the way, McKinley High, I remember Don Chaney played in the NBA?
Oh, yeah, a guard.
Yeah, I think he was a graduate of McKinley High. I'm pretty sure.
Did he play for the Celtics, James?
I think he did. I think maybe the Knicks too. I don't remember, but this is some time ago. So, but he was a very good NBA player, and I think he went to McKinley, but I can't say. But this woman's instincts are dead on. And I like the utility of her verbiage, which means she doesn't use a lot. She gets right to the point. You're a genius.
All right, we've got a Jessica James Bayou combination. I love it. Keep writing, Jessica. The second question is from Frank in Florida. So if Biden sends food and medicine to Cuba like the Marshall Plan, that would win Florida over for the Democrats and get rid of two miserable senators, Rubio and Scott. Hey, I'm all for getting rid of those senators. I don't think this is the prescription, however. I think, a guest we had a couple weeks ago, Admiral James Stavridis, I think basically he had the best ideas about how to approach Cuba, because it is a problem, and they don't want to have a whole bunch of refugees coming in circa 1980. Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter can tell them that. But it's a carrot and a stick. It's to keep the pressure on, to say, hey, if you keep this repression on, we're not going to get anywhere. But also send a diplomat there, talk to them, see if there's a way we can move forward. I don't think just sending food and medicine is going to do the trick.
Yeah, I agree. It's a kind of complicated thing, because the purpose of sanctions is to get people hurting so that they take on the government. I mean, that's the stated purpose of them. Now, there are people that say quite justifiably that we're really messing people's lives up by not sending them food and medicine. And my attitude would be, yes, it's going to cause some short-term pain, but there's some chance that you have a long-term gain. By the way, I think that we're going to get rid of Rubio. I think Val Demings is one of the best Senate candidates that we have. I think her profile is superb. I am all in for Val. I'm going to help her raise money. I like her platform. I like her attitude. I just think that it's the perfect Senate candidate. And remember, the last Senate race we had, that Rick Scott, won by 10,000 votes. And so I am very high on Florida Senate. And I think I think Rubio he's not Lindsey Graham, Kevin McCarthy class. Okay, all right. There are very few that get to that. But he's a pretty slippery guy, really slippery.
Well, you're right about the last Senate race being only 10,000 votes, but I don't know. I find it hard to be bullish on Florida. They still don't have a very good Democratic Party, and
Well, I think
I hope you're
Val's
right.
will
Watch
kick them in
Val
the shape.
Dennis.
Yeah,
Well,
I think they can get better.
That's the hope. Reed in Jacksonville, North Carolina, which he points out is the home of the Marines' largest East Coast
sure it
base,
is.
Camp
Camp
Lejeune.
Lejeune.
He said we East Coast Marines call James a Hollywood Marine, but he's also a two-time Ivy League grad, and he loves the Ivy League Sphincter Hall of Fame. Fellow Princetonian and also two-timer Ted Cruz, that was his favorite. Here's a question for you, James, from Reed, from the East Coast Marine. Why don't the relevant state parties, Democrats and states we're guaranteed to lose, refuse to run a candidate and throw their endorsement behind a single moderate Republican? I guess I don't want to answer your question, but if you can find one.
Yeah, good luck. You know, you're right. I am a West Coast Marine. I went to Paris Island a couple of years ago and toured it, and you know, it's a lot rougher in that South Carolina humidity than it is in, you know, San Diego's June gloom. I'll buy that, but I was glad to be out west. But you're right. Jacksonville's in eastern North Carolina, and I think Camp Lejeune is a second Marine Division. I don't remember, but I think that's what it was. It typically was. But it's a great outfit, and you know, a lot of great stuff goes in. I think what's the big huge? Is it Fort Bragg that's in North Carolina? It's a huge.
Fort Bragg is in North Carolina. Yes.
Yeah, that's a huge.
Yes. The about to be renamed Fort Bragg, named after an infamous Confederate general.
He was massively incompetent.
Right.
He was in Fort Polk with the Episcopal. The thing is, they couldn't even. Most of these are not just named after Confederate generals. Most of them were really shitty generals.
Yeah.
Right. And Braxton Bragg, who had a sugar plantation in Thibodeau, was a particularly shitty general, as was Leonidas Polk, who was an Episcopal bishop. I think he was shot, and Sherman was quite happy about it.
Can't wait for the new names. Brian in Long Island, New York, asked, Democrats won Senate seats in Indiana, Missouri, Delaware, and others after self-described right-wing purists and Tea Party activists won their primaries over more traditional Republican incumbents like Richard Lugar and Mike Castle in Delaware. Remember, Mike Castle lost to the anti-masturbation activist. I forget her name, but I mean, she was great. I miss her. And Brian says, I now read that Senator Lankford might be in Oklahoma, might be in trouble from a right-wing Trumpian, and disgraced former Governor Greitens in Missouri. He might win out there. Remember, he was the guy. He not only had a sex scandal, he had a finance scandal too.
No, yeah, but that wasn't a sex scandal. It was a false imprisonment scandal, which is a crime. In addition to the sex,
he had everything going for him, and he had to resign in disgrace. But, you know, he's a Trumpian. You can't rule out that he could win a primary out there. And I think Brian's question is really a pretty good one. Is it possible history might repeat itself and Democrats squeak through in these seemingly out of reach red states? Missouri, maybe. If Greitens is the nominee, maybe. Oklahoma, you know, I think they could nominate Attila the Hun, and I don't see any hope in Oklahoma.
Let me say this. We had Senator Lankford on our show. And he is a very, very, very conservative guy, right? But I you know, I don't want to say anything like to get him in. But he is a like most people. I have a lot of friends in Oklahoma. I think there are a lot of nice people there, and a lot of people nice people that I disagree with, and I would certainly put him in that category. But one thing I don't have any influence in is a Oklahoma Republican primary, so. I think you Senator Lankford, let me say this, you're far too right-wing for my taste, but at least you're a friendly guy.
You ain't gonna get me to knock the Sooner State. I'm married to someone who was born in Okie, James. So I'm not gonna knock Oklahoma, or I'm in deep trouble at home. But
welcome to the SEC.
Hey, Steve in Atlanta, Georgia, said earlier this year, all the news was how Donald Trump would be indicted and hit with multiple lawsuits, And other than the Trump Organization CFO, it appears lawsuits are being prepared, but they haven't been brought to fruition. It's the same with Matt Gaetz. There's continued reporting about all of his wrongdoings, but no indictments. Has the legal system now realized they don't have enough evidence to formally charge these individuals? Steve asked, I think, hoping that's not the case.
I don't think it is. There's an expression that the wheels of justice grind. So the stuff on Tom Barrack is even worse than you think it is.
Oh.
And you're forgetting about all of the stuff that's going on with the Manhattan DA. We're forgetting, I think Trump may be complicit in the January 6th, and I think people really believe that. So I understand it's kind of frustrating, and, the Mueller thing was horribly frustrating to a lot of people, but I don't think this is remotely done yet.
Yeah, I agree. You have to wait a while, and I think that Manhattan DA is building a case. I mean, I don't think the end all is Alan Weissenberg. So let's just see. And there may be other cases too. Bill in Houston, Texas, notes the Republicans rejected hiring extra IRS workers to inspect the returns of high income taxpayers. Why not have the IRS pull 10 returns at random from the top 0.1% and audit them? I don't want to tell the IRS I don't want to give them any instructions. That's not what we do with our tax agency. But I do want to point out to the incredible hypocrisy of Republicans in opposing that initiative to pay for an infrastructure deal, which is going to apparently happen anyway. I mean, the IRS is under-resourced. They are they have technology needs. They haven't been updated for years and years and years. And for every extra dollar you spend and those investments, you gain another $7, $8, or $10 in revenues, and you're gaining them not from the average working stiff out there, James. You're gaining them almost exclusively from tax cheats, rich tax cheats, and it's something that should be easy, it should be natural, but that's not what Republicans want.
Right. So it's worse than you think, because wage earners, which are most of the people in the United States. So if I'm a plumber, right, and I get a check, they take out, they withhold the income tax, they withhold the FICA tax, they withhold the Medicare tax, they withhold this, all right, and then what you like is come the time they withhold too much, and then come April 15th, you get a refund. Understand, that's not the way that people like you and I file a tax return. We don't file a wage thing. They are dependent on what we tell them that our income is, compound this by tens of millions. And they don't, and why should a plumber has to pay, maybe he gets a $100 job somewhere, I'm not saying it never happens, but most working people are forced, justifiably so, their taxes taken out for them, and the only way that they can have any faith that the rich are paying their fair share is you have vigorous enforcement. And the Democrats have to point that out to people. Because there's no withholding. There's no withholding. Tom Barrack does not
absolutely
pay a withholding
agree.
tax.
No, and neither does Donald J. Trump. But it's a hard issue when you're
tough.
The tax auditors are never popular, but
right.
It's certainly on the merits. You're right. Just before we go from this segment, James, Mike in Queens, New York, wrote us a note. Right, Mike is a fan, but he said, Mike says he's appalled that we asked listeners for nominations for lifetime Ivy League sphincters, and then Mike accuses us of betraying him by turning around and relying on picks of Sean Wilentz, Princeton professor who we both admire greatly. A lot of us worked very hard in our selections, only for you to defer to wait for it. Wait, an Ivy League professor. He's also upset. The pick of Rutherford B. Hayes. He said Hayes was a fierce abolitionist before the Civil War and a hero in the Civil War. Now, he fully supported Reconstruction until he didn't, but he withdrew the troops because he cut a deal. I mean, I will just say this, James. You can talk about Sean Wilentz because he is one of the best. But Mike, when it comes to Hayes, everything you say about him before is right, and then in the most important decision of his life, he was wrong. He ended Reconstruction. He pulled the troops out of the South. He re-engaged a segregationist America. I'm sorry, he deserved the Sphincter Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I think Mike makes the case good. And by the way, I found some of the people that graduate from Ivy League schools are assholes. Many are not. Many of them win Nobel Prizes and, write books and cure diseases and, so, yeah.
Become presidents of the United States.
Right, yeah. But I love Mike's passion and I love it, I love it. But I think the defense of Hayes is, well, he was a good guy. His heart was in the right place until it was politically expedient. Then he introduced, 100 years of Jim Crowism. It's a defense, Mike, but, I think you made our point.
All right. Keep taking us on, Mike. Keep it coming.
Yes, yeah.
And please send those letters. There were good questions this week that I didn't read for a simple reason. You didn't tell us where you're from. It's really important to know where you're from.
Right. We're big on geography.
God, we love these questions. They are so good. And it was nice to be back with New Zealand again this week, James.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I want to go there. Peter Jackson, that They Shall Not Grow Old might be the best movie I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it was so well done and creative. But I want to go to New Zealand. And they don't have any COVID there. They do a good job.
Now, they're having more problems in Australia, though, aren't they? I don't know that. I thought I read that. That may not be true. I don't know. James, before we leave this segment, I just want to very, very quickly note and have you pick up on it. Simone Biles, the greatest gymnast of all times, dropped out of one of the Olympic contests for mental health reasons. I think people forget that these stars, these people who we glorify in some ways and create high expectations, boy, there's a lot of pressure there. And I think this young woman, who is just an incredible athlete and by all lights, seems to be a really good person. But boy, she's had a lot of hardship in her life. And my heart went out to her. I think getting her well again is more important than even bringing home more goals.
Well, I make a larger point here. Mental health is a huge issue in the United States. I mean, huge. And I think it's been, kind of stigmatized. And people say, well, just an ordinary person like me, Simone Biles is anything but an ordinary person. I mean, she's extraordinary. And I actually think that there's some chance. I know it's terrible for this young person to have to go through this at the pinnacle of her career, but I think there's some chance it will give people some faith, some ability to face up to some of the issues they have. And at least I hope that. And maybe I'm naive and want to see the good side of everything, but I think there's a potential good side of this to say that, arguably the most talented athlete in the world had the same thing I'm suffering from, and I'm a barista at Starbucks. So maybe there's some hope in this.
Boy, that's a good note. That's a good note to strike. We all can hope that. Hey, James, now for our Outrage of the Week segment. There are a lot of choices, as always. And I'm not going to defend the way the CDC has communicated its latest recommendation on masking in high-risk areas. I think substantively they're probably right. But because with this Delta variant, we're in a very dicey period, especially in those states that have failed. But the loud criticism of the CDC over the last couple of days has come from Republican governors like Ricketts in Nebraska and Reynolds in Iowa and Kristi Noem in South Dakota. These states have among the very worst records in America on COVID. On COVID. South Dakota is essentially tied for first place in having the most incidents per capita. Nebraska and Iowa aren't quite as bad as South Dakota, but they're really bad. A lot more incidents per capita than those supposedly left-wing states governed by Democrats in California, New York, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. I'm more worried than I was a few weeks ago, James, even though here in Washington we're pretty safe. but we're in a dangerous times, and those know-nothing governors just make it worse.
Oh, it's horrible. A month ago I was planning my life, and I had to get out of Louisiana. If you look at the infections per 100,000, and by the way, there is a almost perfect correlation between the number of infections you have and the political leanings of that area. All right, you just got to go look at it, and I don't understand. By the way, there's a piece of research today Pfizer came out with that said if you get the third shot, your immunity is up 22-fold. I'm going to be honest with you. You know what I did? I got the third shot. And by the way, if they tell me a fourth shot is what I need, I'll get a fourth shot. I'll get vaccines like I get candy. And how can anybody be so stupid as to not get it?
Like you get bourbon, James. I think that's a better analogy.
Absolutely. And I had my shot 3 hours ago. Maybe I'll feel bad, somewhere down the road. But right now, I knock on wood. But shit, you give me 22 times, and it's so dumb. They got to get rid of the vaccines. It's not like you're taking it away from somebody that wants it. These stupid. It's the only thing I can tell you. You're just stupid if you're not vaccinated.
There are people, there are places.
1% of people have it. Let me be clear. Some people might have a real reason they can't, but that's a very limited number.
It is.
I could choke. I could slug somebody. I could slug them.
You are so right. There's a small number of people who have legitimate religious objections. That's teeny. There's a few who have medical reasons, and there are some people of color who historically are skeptical of vaccines. I understand that. I think they have to be persuaded because this is different. This works. This is effective. And if there are any resistors out there, and I suspect there are not very many, please get vaccinated.
So how far, when you grew up in mainline, how far was Valley Forge from where you grew up?
A mile.
All right. In 1777, I guess it was, maybe 78, in that winter, George Washington mandated that the Continental Army take a smallpox vaccine. And if you think that this vaccine is not more developed than the smallpox vaccine was in, the late 1700s, then you're nuts. All right, George fricking Washington, the Continental Army, all right, but in that winter when, they finally got to Trenton and, one of the most significant battles in American history, you know what? They were all brave and they were all vaccinated. It's so fucking stupid. I can't tell you how stupid it is.
James, do you know how many states do not require the polio vaccine for elementary school kids?
None.
The answer is zero. Zero. I mean, mandatory polio vaccines, absolutely mandatory, and and there's a reason because the kid could get sick and he could infect others.
Don't get me started. As if we were kids, they said, "Well, this is the Eisenhower vaccine. I don't want it."
Right.
How dumb can you be? It's just
if they had been around, James, there'd have been a lot more iron lungs. I mean, it really is a remarkable what these people are doing.
I mean, what you know what? He wasn't an entrepreneur. He wasn't a capitalist. They asked him if he was going to patent the polio vaccine, and he said, "Well, that'd be like patenting sunshine. Why would I want to do that?" All right?
Yeah.
I bet you Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson can't stand Jonas Salk. Pittsburgh goody Jew. We don't need these kind of people that, develop vaccines, work hard, and say, I want this as my gift to the world. Please.
And all he did, James, was save tens of thousands of lives. That's all.
You and me, we couldn't leave the house. I was stuck in the summer, and I know the same thing happened to you. Your parents were like, we're scared to death of that shit. We were choked.
Right. No, it's true. All right, get vaccinated.
Yeah. Well, I know you're vaccinated.
Okay, are we out of this, or you have something more, James?
No, if you listen to this show, you're vaccinated. This is 100%. But goddamn, try to get somebody else to get it.
Reach out. Hey, thanks for listening to Politics War Room with James Carville. I'm Al Hunt. Don't forget to send your questions for us by email to politicswarroom@gmail.com or tweet them for next week's show at Politicon. Following this episode, we really appreciate it if you'd check out the link to our sponsors, Rise and HelloFresh. We thank you for supporting them. When you do, it helps make this podcast happen. To keep up with us, subscribe to Politics War Room on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen. Please rate the show with a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with another program as we continue our War Room planning.